So let's talk about working for the FAANGS, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Google, those companies. Now, for a lot of developers, this is kind of like a glamorous type of job to want to get into. I can understand the appeal. But you should maybe consider things a little bit more before buying into that. Now, working for a FAANG or any other huge corporation may be something that you want to do. There's a sense of job security, you got a big name behind you, et cetera, et cetera. A few things. Number one, job security is not really there per se, because if for whatever reasons they want to cut, they cut. Microsoft a few years back did a huge round of cutting. Not that they were losing money. Microsoft has got tons of cash. Still one of the richest companies in the world, but because they decided that the priorities were changing, they just went whoosh, and that's normal in business. You're going to have big rounds of cutting at some point. Another thing to consider about the FAANGs is that you're going to be working for very large corporations, which means corporate lifestyle. Corporate lifestyle, again, may be something you want to do, but you have to understand that the corporate lifestyle is very different from working for a startup, very different from working for a small, medium-sized business, very different, of course, being a freelancer or starting your own business. When you work for a very large corporation, you're going to have to deal with bureaucracy, you're going to have to deal with red tape, you're going to have to deal with that corporate culture that requires a lot of good interpersonal social skills, the ability to navigate this type of bureaucratic hierarchy where, from my perspective as being a lifelong entrepreneur from the outside looking in and from talking to people who've been in it for decades, it's a weird world for me as the entrepreneur, in that corporate hierarchies, big, huge corporate lifestyle, for a lot of people, for the majority, is very detached in many ways from the nuts and bolts of small, medium-sized business. And there's just this, you have to get into it. There's just this weird, well, if you want to get into it, there's just this weird social dynamic, hierarchical dynamic in the corporate environment. So you have to just, again, take that into consideration. Again, this may be something that is exactly what you want. But remember, when you're a developer in that environment, yes, you're going to be treated fairly well, if not very well. But especially if you're younger, they're going to work you really hard. So they're going to give you perks like video games and free coffee and whatever, but you're going to be working long hours, but the pay is going to be pretty good. That said, you can get very good pay working for smaller companies, unknown names, and you might find yourself in a position where you don't have to deal with that bureaucracy, you don't have to deal with the corporate culture. What you want to do if you're considering all of this, whether you go freelance, start your own thing, go work for a small company, a medium-sized, or maybe try to get a FAANG job, which, by the way, if you think about it, what percentage of developer jobs in the world are FAANG jobs, meaning Facebook, Apple, Amazon? A very tiny percent. So to design your entire career or your learning trek, if you will, based on scoring a FAANG job, it's a bit of a long shot situation, And as I said, working for a FAANG, I don't necessarily see it as going to be any better, and some people might argue it could be worse than working for a smaller organization, depending on how you like to work, the type of environment you want to be in. Another thing to consider is that for the FAANG jobs, because they're very large organizations, chances are, although I heard that's shifting a little in Google, Google did a study of all their employees, and what they discovered, that there was no performance difference between people who had a higher education, computer science degrees, etc., versus people who didn't have a higher education, who didn't have a college degree. They literally found no difference in the quality of the employees. Keep that in mind. So the fact that Google published this should tell you a lot about what's going on internally to Google. That is a very important point to consider. As I've said over and over again, the most important thing you can do after your fundamentals in software development is to start developing reputation. The best way to develop reputation is to actually have a track record. Put up a site, do a couple projects for people, showcase these projects, right? That is huge. Certification can help, degrees can help, but again, when Google says, you know what, there's no difference in terms of how good the coder is, how good the person is, whether they have a degree or not, that should tell you something with what they are discovering. Anyway, that's my quick take on the FAANGs, whether you want to work for them, consider the lifestyle that the FAANG job suggests, consider the requirements. Now, Google may be shifting, not requiring higher degrees, but maybe the other FAANGs, I don't know what the internal politics are there as well. Consider the fact that there are many other developer jobs outside of the FAANGs, outside of big corporations that pay super well and may give you a lot more freedom, may give you a lot more access to advanced coding and more divergent coding experiences. Remember, when you're working for any large organization, they're going to silo you. Typically, you're going to have a type of job that you're going to do. You're going to do this type of work. That's what you're going to do. Whereas if you go work for smaller businesses, medium-sized businesses, there's much more of a chance, especially small business, that you're going to have exposure to many different levels of programming, many different areas, which will give you a lot more experience, will make you a more valuable employee quicker, a more valuable developer quicker. It's going to be much more interesting for most people because you're going to be doing a little bit of this and doing that. So there's pros and cons to everything. Maybe you want to be in a corporate structure. Maybe you're comfortable there. Maybe you want to do one type of programming for 5 years before you shift to something else, or 10 years before you shift to something else. I don't know. You have to decide that. So there you go. That's the long and short of it. Think twice about the FAANGs. I know they're aspirational, and that's cool, but consider the things we just talked about in this video. All right. Let me know what you think. Comment below. Bye-bye.